That seems fair to me.
Fairness isn't the issue. If anything,
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make a judgment on what fair is.
You can't.
Donnybrook is made possible through the generous support of the members of KETC.
Nuisance.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you aboard, and great to have our friends at the Gatesworth for making this program possible week in and week out as you do. Let's meet those assembled around the big green table for this Thursday, starting with the chief cook and bottle washer at the Show Me Institute. She's Brenda Talent, back on the program. Along with Mr. Joe Holleman from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com, and his column is Joe's St. Louis. Ray Hartmann, one of our founders, who is also with STLmag.com and St. Louis Magazine, and the one and only Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American and STLmag.com. So, Brenda, great to have you back, and I think it's good news that we will now have a nonstop to Iceland. It was announced yesterday that WOW Airlines, which is an Iceland-based airline, is going to have nonstop starting next May from St. Louis to Reykjavik for $99. And if you want to spend a little more for more legroom and oxygen or something, it's going to be like $249. But the no frills is $99. I find that just incredible. And I understand Iceland is very nice in May. So you're pretty happy, aren't you?
Well, all I can say is wow, because they're going to get approximately, I believe it's what, $1.2 million in subsidies. Wow, about $800,000 in marketing. They're going to be, they don't have to pay landing fees for 18 months. And here's the kicker. They're going to sign an obligation to be here for 2 years. That means for 6 months, they'll have to pay landing fees, but they'll get all that free advertisement. So, wow.
I think it's great. And I'll tell you why I think it's great. If there's one common denominator, whether Republicans, Democrats, whatever, if you talk about St. Louis and what needs to improve, it's air traffic at Lambert International. And in the big picture of things, yeah, I understand it's corporate welfare, but when you look at the amount of money versus economic development programs of all sizes and shapes, this to me is a logical one that, and I don't know all the details of it, but the idea, and you can make fun of it being Iceland, but the fact is they obviously think there's a market, and the fact is we have so much difficulty attracting businesses and keeping him because of the lack of nonstop service all over the place. I think anything that our economic development folks do to push the airport and push more traffic is good.
The only thing I would say is that this airline, WOW, is indicating to us that to play in St. Louis, to operate here, they want lower landing fees, and we do have higher landing fees than places like Dallas, Fort Worth,
which should be
and yet we take about $6 million in revenue from the airport every year and funnel it back to general revenue in the city of St. Louis. That money should be going to lowering landing fees so that we can attract more airlines. I mean, this is
more competitive for all the airlines. I mean, if you lower the landing fees, then the other airlines might have more flights.
Well, but I think we have a huge flaw in St. Louis because we have high landing fees, and the money that could lower those fees is instead going to the city of St. Louis. It's a bad business model, and it's hurting the growth of the entire region.
That's what I was going to say about the business model is, I mean, if you could convince me that this is not a shot in the dark, then I think the investment really does pay off. But I mean, I'm just not, just in reading what I have, I'm not convincing that A, that many people are actually going to do it, $99 or not, and then two, is it okay for people from Iceland to fly here and fly back? Are they going to come to St. Louis? How many? You fly a jet over there, does it have to sit around for 3 days and wait for enough St. Louisans to get on it to pay for the gas to get back?
In the wintertime, Alvin, we'll be a hot spot for them. And there'll be daylight here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's right.
For the sun and the beaches.
We have a lot to offer with the music scene and the cultural amenities.
But if we had that much to offer, we wouldn't have to pay $800,000 in marketing for them. I mean,
but
part of why they're coming here is because we're subsidizing so much of their activity.
And you're going to Iceland to see the beauty. I know that there's fun stuff to do. I've never been there, but it's beautiful. And you're going there to see the country and how beautiful it is. And now, I'm not hating on St. Louis, but now what's the difference? It's not like you're flying to Las Vegas where it's like, it's beautiful here, but I want to go to Vegas. I I just don't. It might work.
Europeans love Route 66.
Look, you might be right.
Now,
The
bottom
planes might be packed. I just so seriously doubt it.
I hope they are.
Alvin, I mean, I think the airline that's involved, and I don't know much about it, obviously is not just idly doing this, and it's not such a huge subsidy that, oh my God, the airline's just over the moon about this. I think that it's anything we can do incrementally. I agree with you about the landing fees, but you know, I just think that it's great to be moving in the direction of more traffic at Lambert.
And plus, WOW will connect to other airports in Frankfurt and Paris and London, and so people in those cities will go through Reykjavik to get here. So hopefully that'll work. Now, Ray, I want to ask you about a story that, not a good one, another one. We had a protest after a police shooting, fatal police shooting in St. Louis, and this was in the Grove last night. And there were protesters in the street, and a car driven by a white guy, it was a Mercedes, did not stop, did not turn around. He did slow down, honked his horn, but he went through, injuring 3, which is bad. I don't want anyone to get hurt, and I know you don't either, but if someone is protesting in the middle of the street, doesn't that person bear some of the responsibility for his or her injuries?
No. I don't know why you brought up that it's a white. What do you got against white guys? You're bringing up white guys driving the car. You're suggesting all of us drive like that?
I'm trying to be accurate in description.
You're just a total racial stereotyping right there. No, I think that no. I mean, you do not have the right to use your car essentially as a weapon. And whether you're irritated by the protesters, one could ask why, you know, if the protesters are illegally blocking the street and the police were there, one might ask why the police did not peacefully disperse that group of people, but you don't get to disperse them with your car.
Thankfully, I get to disagree with Ray, because some people always say to me, they go, boy, when you're on there, you always agree with Ray. We didn't expect that. I couldn't disagree more. Of course, you bear a responsibility when you stand in the middle of a street that was made to convey vehicular traffic, and you are hit by a vehicle. You have some responsibility. I don't see how you can say you're completely held harmless. You're standing in the middle of the street illegally. You have no permission to block that street. And then to turn around and say, well, the police should have got them out of the street, then we'd have heard about how the police were curbing their right to protest. And believe me, we heard that at Ferguson. We heard it in the Shaw neighborhood. So what the police came to appease people, was to let them have it and let the street be opened. I have a couple of exceptions. One, you'll hear it as he barreled into it. I watched 2 different videos and talked to one of our photographers who was on the scene. He said the car did indeed stop. Had been honking his horn, stopped. Then, as a car does when you take an automatic, you take your foot off the brake, it starts to roll forward. It started to roll forward. One person jumped on the car or hit on the car. Another person got on the car. At that point in time, the person didn't burn rubber, as the old saying used to go, but did accelerate. Those people slid, fell off the side of the car. He did not run over anybody, as also has been erroneously reported, and drove away, and has since was arrested for felony fleeing, which sounds like a logical charge. Now, should this gentleman have probably said, my life would be so much easier if I just turned around and went in a different direction? Absolutely. But the idea that somehow in civil disobedience there is implied that you are disobeying something, in that case it would be the law. So the idea that you have a protest and that somehow that gives you the right to block a street, I want someone to prove to me where that exists in the law.
Okay, you kind of touched on it, and all I'm going to say is that, one, you can't purposely, and I'm going to hit somebody with your car. You can't, you know, the vehicle is just going to destroy a person, harm a person. You can't go there. But look, they're wrong, and they're in the street. They're wrong, they're in violation of the law, they should be arrested and fined, or however the police decide. They are wrong. You in the vehicle are right. You're right. They shouldn't be there and you're in your car. But you got to go home with the knowledge that, well, at least I was right and they were wrong. But this whole life thing where the second you started approaching them with your car, all right, hoping they'd move or they'll really get out of the way, or I can't believe they're out there. The second you're inching out there, that's before you've even hit anybody.
You can't even inch?
I said, like, but
you can't
that's
inch?
when
Why
you're,
can't you inch? If it was the President of the United States and, like, you know, his vehicle no matter what president, they would inch through. They wouldn't like turn around, would they? The highway's there, as Joe said, to convey people. And you know, you're a protester. You got to be careful because that guy could be mentally ill in the car. He could be drunk.
Well,
he could be many things. Why use the street? Why not use a sidewalk? Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and one of this thing is, again, something like this highlights the need to get all the facts. I mean, I've heard so many different versions of what has happened. How threatened was the individual in the vehicle? I don't know whether he was threatened at all or whether he really was very fearful. So from a standpoint, if you're ever in these situations, dial 911 and start recording on 911 what you feel. But the other thing that I think all of these situations have in common is the police need to begin carrying out their responsibility and maintaining law and order. Then we wouldn't have these kind of situations.
And Brennan and I agree. And you know, the first thing that would come up is that we live in a police state and they're being denied their First Amendment rights.
Wait a minute.
We heard it in Ferguson. We heard
excuse
it in
me.
Shaw.
So what I said is, first of all, let's be clear.
Caved.
Okay. When if you have a situation where protesters in the street, and I'm assuming they didn't have a permit to close the street, but let's not assume that the protesters are doing, because they were engaging in civil disobedience, that they were either threatening these people, which there's no evidence they were, or that they are inherently evil.
Let's not assume they're not. Let's not assume they're not.
Let's assume they're Americans, exercise their First Amendment right. If they go too far, the one thing when
let's move on,
the
Ray,
police have peaceful ways to disperse the crowd. It doesn't follow that getting tear gas out immediately would be a good idea.
That's peaceful, actually.
Let's assume the best of everybody.
Okay, let's move on.
Yes,
Okay. I'm sure our viewers will have something to say on your turn around the corner. Brenda, I want to ask you about Josh Hawley, who's the Attorney General, and he might be a candidate for U.S. Senate, taking on the incumbent Claire McCaskill in 2018. But it turns out that on August the 8th, even though statute 27.10.010 says that he shall reside at the seat of government, which is Jefferson City, he voted August 8th in Boone County in Columbia. So do you think he's in trouble and in political peril because of this?
No, I think we're entering the silly season because we're about to go into an election year. But first of all, I would ask, do people ever have multiple residences? The last time I checked, there are some people who do. In fact, you can point to college students. College students actually can have a residence where they go to college or where they came from. It's an issue of intent. Josh Hawley actually does have a home in Boone County. He's got an apartment in Jefferson City. And when you look at the constitutional article that says he shall reside isn't defined in that situation, and basically I would argue that's a common sense definition. He does reside there. And if you look through the Missouri statutes, you are going to see that the statutes actually distinguish and can distinguish between permanent place of residence versus the other types of residence. So definitely our statutes know how to make that distinction. You can have multiple residences, and then the key is that you don't vote in two places, you vote in one in which you have a residence.
May not be a election-altering event. However, there are certain people, they're like, when the CPA or the auditor runs off with the money, you look at him and say, like, dude, you're supposed to be watching the money, not stealing it. When the, Attorney General is all up for some voter ID, and if some old lady or old man votes in the wrong places, voter fraud, and we need this and we need that and whatnot, and then you do this. See, you're not even listening to yourself. You're so wrapped up in your own politics that the law and what matters to other people who I'm getting on doesn't matter to me, because I'm Josh Hawley and I'm Attorney General running for Senate. And so thus, it means something to me, because as Bill has been saying about the governor, not a serious man. Well, he's serious about trying to stay in office. He's serious about running for office. And I'm getting that feeling about Mr. Hawley now, too.
This may not be important, but it's interesting, and it's good politics for Claire McCaskill. And anyone that wants to be outraged if this were reversed and it were a Democrat, the Republicans would be in full-fledged outrage all the way to Fox News, and it would be about, again, as Alvin says, about voter fraud and so forth. Claire had a very simple statement in which she got out the fact that she's just a Missouri-educated law student, and as opposed to Josh Hawley, who's, like she said, Yale or Harvard, which I think is wonderfully ironic, given that he's going to run on a ticket with somebody who loves the poorly educated. But the fact is she's going to have a great time with this, and it's a good political story for her and a good soundbite, and that's the way our system goes.
Does that explain why she didn't pay taxes?
So that's a soundbite on the other side.
I have two things. Number one, I think first of all we should use the example just set during the last question and say, is he a good American who had evil intent, or should we assume that he's just a good man who accidentally voted somewhere else?
We don't know what
I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, Ray, just like
do you know what prior felonies he has?
Do you know if his intent was evil? Do you know if his intent
I
was
don't
evil?
Did I say evil?
The other point is I love it when politicians start playing politics, because they all get their noses out of joint and they all do the same thing. So let's have at it. Let's dig up something on Claire and then have Claire dig something else up on him and let him go.
Alvin Reid, I want to ask you, speaking of politicians, in hot water, State Senator Marie Chappelle-Nadel, we talked about this last week. She said in a Facebook post that she hoped that President Trump would be assassinated. She has since apologized for that, but there is a movement to call a special session. It's led by Mike Parson, Lieutenant Governor, to throw her out. And he's going to need 2 Democratic signatures to have this special session. So what do you think is going to happen? Should there be a special session to bounce Maria Chappelle-Nadel?
Well, first, there should not be a special session, okay? Now, if they want to address this during the regular legislative session, then they have the right to do so. There should not be a special session. All right. I think when we look at our legislature right now, I have problems with it. I'm in disagreement with probably the majority of things that they do. I think as far as ethics and some of the behavior that has gone on in Jefferson City over the last maybe decade, or people would tell me forever or whatever. But I just wonder, what is really on some of these folks' mind down there. But that being said, I think a legislative body, regardless, let's take it to another state, another time, another presence. If you did what she did, I think that legislative body has a right to sit in judgment of you and possibly told you that you have to leave your seat. Because I disagree with the politicians in Jefferson City right now, does not mean that a legislative body such as theirs in our state or another should not approach this and should not take that action. I wish she would resign. She should leave the seat, okay? And I just think what she did was just to a point where she needs to give her seat up. And however that is accomplished.
In no defense of the senator, I think what she said was wrong, and I agree with you up to the point. I simply have a fundamental problem when people who do not live in a politician's district end up playing a hand in who represents that district. If what she did was so bad, and I believe it was, they have elections to take care of these things. Vote her out. Be opponent, mount whatever campaign you can against her, and get her out of office. But the idea that someone from Pemiscot County is going to decide who represents her district, I have a problem with that, and that is absolutely, let me make clear, no defense of the senator.
No, I'm very sorry, Joe, but I agree with you.
I do.
And no, I think I personally want her to resign, and there's only one type of person, and they're not really good people, who would want her not to resign, and that is any Republican. They would like her to be around. They're not good people.
That's the funny thing, right? They all want her out.
No, they don't want her out. I mean, they shouldn't want her out. But my point is this. I think we have a slippery slope, and that is the idea of that legislation. I understand and respect what Alvin's saying. Certainly, I think we can all agree a special session. They can't keep calling special sessions. But I don't think it's a real slippery slope, I think, to start having this legislative body start kicking people out. It's undemocratic, and it's where does it start and where does it end?
All right, she did apologize. So, hey,
all right,
let's
okay.
move on.
Can I,
Let's move
real
on.
quick?
Real quick.
I'm a legislator. I smack my wife around. But the county's on my side, police on my side, everybody knows I smack my wife around, okay? All right. The body itself can say, like, now we ain't gonna have no women smackers sitting in no seat here, okay? All right, but no, nobody has the right to.
If you're not prosecuted and found guilty.
That's what I'm saying, but they still have no right to throw me out.
That's correct.
Okay.
Until you're convicted.
All right.
Alvin, I want to ask you, I want to ask you, Brenda, about a movement now that I think was captured in a column by one of your associates at the Show Me Institute, and that is to question the teachers' pensions in the state of Missouri, which I like. I mean, it's a defined benefit pension, which is a rarity these days. Teachers kick in 14.5% per pay period. Their employer, the school district, another 14.5%. And after about 33, 34 years, they can get 85% of their last 3 years' salary on an annual basis. It's really good.
If you stay that long, yes.
But what concerns do you have about that great pension program?
Well, the concern is that it's unfair. And here's why it's unfair. Okay, you talked about the contributions. You're a brand new teacher. You're contributing your 14.5%. The district's contributing that. But you move. You move after 4 years. You'll get back the amount you contributed, the 14.5, but that's all you get. That other money stays in the fund to help fund the benefits, the defined benefits that are going to be paid out later. You have to stay in the program for over 20 years in order to get back what you put in. So if you don't stay over 20 years teaching for whatever reason, you have to move, you've been in for 15 years, you're not going to get back what you put in. In addition, because of the way the salary scales are set, they differ. In rural areas, oftentimes what you'll see is the salary step schedule is pretty even. In our wealthier districts, what you actually see is a little bit of curve where it goes up as you approach retirement. And that's relevant, and it's relevant because your pension is based upon your last 3 years. So if you can do things like become administrator or you get a big bump your last 3 years, you're going to pull more out, which means that teachers in rural districts are helping to fund the benefits for our wealthier districts. So it's an unfair system in the way it operates.
I'll tell you why it is fair, and this is why. One, if you put in that amount of time, you deserve that. You deserve that pension. You sign a contract that says this is what you get if you stay this long. All right, good. But what do the wealthier districts, the districts that have the highest paid teachers? If you look, they have the most teachers that have like master's degree and advanced education. Why? Because they want to be a better school district because that's good for the entire community. So what do you get? People get their master's degree and they get paid more. And as a result, no, wait a minute. All right, now when you become a teacher in one of the wealthier school districts, you could be a teacher for 20 years. After 5 years, you know what? A lot of people decide, I want to be a principal. A lot of people, I want to go into administration. And it might be because pursuit of education or pursuit of money. But you cannot hold it against this district because they set up a system that they want the best, they want the brightest, they want to pay them the most, and to get them at the end of the line is a big payday. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, the one thing that is a little bit wacky, and I agree with Brenda, and I agree with you, Alvin, and that is I have seen this where people get their PhD in like their 33rd year, and that bumps up their salary average for the last 3 years, and that's the one that determines the pension. I think that should be reformed.
When you talk about the system being unfair, do teachers not know what they're getting into when they vow? I mean, no one puts a gun to their head to get into the system.
Well, I do think for teachers who are coming into the system, they might well intend to stay for many years. But things change. They move.
But they
have to go to another state.
I don't understand what's so unfair. If
they only get the money they put back.
But that's they're not out anything.
But if you had a 401k where the employer was matching that contribution, they get the whole
package. Those 401ks, teachers don't want those.
It'd be one thing. You lost me.
We all like to buy benefits,
Brenda,
but in the private sector,
Brenda,
you don't see that very
I know
often.
the problem of fat cat teachers is just killing our society, but the fact is that you lost me at they get their 14.5% back. If they get their money back, you know, it's not like some huge civil injustice against teachers. If they were losing that 14.5, it'd be one thing. I just don't see where this is a big fairness.
Let's move on to another topic, our last one, Joe Holleman, and we're grateful to have you with us this week. Airbnb is going to be shut out of Ladue, and I think that's a loss because I think St. Louis would be enhanced if out-of-towners could spend their time in Ladue. Well, and I know there's no way outside of Airbnb I'm ever going to spend a night there.
Well, let me carry the water for all my good friends and close relatives who live in Ladue because I spend a lot of time there and very familiar with that area. I think that I don't care one way or the other, but if Ladue decided they don't want them, isn't that the very essence of local control, which I always believe government closest to the people is the best government, and they've decided we have planning and zoning laws, we don't want it. That's their right to say that. Now, whether we think it's right or whether we think it's wrong is really kind of an addendum to the whole argument. The argument is, I mean, to me, the point is they don't want them, so you can't have them. Go to sell your property, move to a place that allows you to have them. But the idea that Ladue should be taken to task for enforcing a legitimate law, I don't really see what the problem is.
I completely agree because, I mean, first of all, maybe people who don't want all these people from Iceland coming into their community.
They're coming over.
There's a lot of stereotypes about those people from Iceland.
But Iceland does it.
Iceland does it big time. Airbnb is huge in Reykjavik.
Well,
That's
and I think
serious.
Joe's right. And
but, but when Margaret Galeo had her, little sign in the front yard that says, peace, happen, something like that.
It was a free speech issue about protesting at war.
This is a commerce issue. For an individual who's got a $3 million home, can he rent out the carriage house?
She was protesting the Persian Gulf War.
Right.
Well, what are you talking about?
Laws have always restricted the conducting of business in private residential properties. That's different than, I don't ever know a law that said, yes, I can take away your free speech.
This is freedom.
It's not a good comparison.
All right, Daddy,
it's not a good comparison.
But look, all right, you're down in your luck, man. You're having a tough time for a while, so I let you live in my pool house, for a couple of weeks. Well, am I breaking the same law?
You're not advertising. You're not setting it up as an official business. What you're doing is you're doing a friend a favor.
If you charge them and it's not for more than 30 days in Ladue, you're breaking the law.
All right. Well, see, I disagree with that.
And Ladue is just full of fat cat teachers.
We're going to take phone calls from Ladue and beyond on your turn just a few moments away. But first, a look at the mailbag, including this letter from Venki Venkatesh, who wrote, "It's a shame to have an individual like Charlie Brennan as host of any talk show on Channel 9. I think confused intellects like Charlie Brennan are a threat to St. Louis and Missouri." Venki, thanks for that letter. We also heard from Jay Clampert of Chesterfield. "Charlie, you're right about the number of expired temporary tags on streets in the St. Louis area. What's going on out there? Should ask Ray Hartmann." Hey, you can write us care of KETC, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Glad that Ray could get out of jail by Thursday night.
Call it Venki.
Letters at ketc.org and hashtag Donnybrook STL for those of you in the Twitterverse. Thanks a lot to Brenda Talent and Joe Holleman for sitting in this week. We sure appreciate that. Stay tuned, everybody, for your turn because Alvin, Reid, and Ray Hartmann will be taking your phone calls. Have a great evening.
Donnybrook is made possible through the generous support of the members of KETC.